For my English summative, I'd like to analyze 1984, a novel by George Orwell. Before we begin, I'm going to give a brief summary on what the book's about. 1984 is a dystopian novel by George Orwell, published in 1949, which follows the life of Winston Smith, a low-ranking member of the party. The party watches him through telescreens. Everywhere he looks, he sees the face of the party's leader, a figure known only as Big Brother. The party controls everything in Ashenia. Even thinking rebellious thoughts is illegal. As the novel opens, Winston feels frustrated by the oppression of the party, which prohibits free thought, sex, and any expression of individuality. He becomes interested in a party member named O'Brien, who Winston believes is a secret member of Brotherhood, the mysterious group that works to overthrow the party. Later, at work and on his walk, Winston sees a dark-haired girl named Julia. He fears she is a member of the Thought Police. One day, at the Ministry of Truth, the girl slips him a note. The note says, "I love you." Afterward, the protagonist Winston Smith rents Mr. Charrington's flat, which has no telescreen. In the room, Winston starts to do everything which is prohibited. He writes a diary, has an affair with Julia, and speaks badly about the party. As the story continues, we find out that Mr. Charrington is a member of the Thought Police and that there was a hidden telescreen behind the painting in the room. Eventually, Winston and Julia get arrested, taken to the Ministry of Love. Winston finds that O'Brien, too, is a spy of the party who simply pretended to be a member of the Brotherhood. O'Brien spends months torturing and brainwashing Winston, who struggles to resist. At last, O'Brien now straps a cage full of rats, Winston's biggest fear, onto Winston's head. Winston snaps, pleading with O'Brien to do it to Julia, not to him. Giving up Julia is what O'Brien wanted from Winston all along. His spirit is broken. Later, Winston meets Julia, but no longer feels anything for her. At the end, Winston sits at a cafe writing the equation 2 + 2 = 5, symbolizing his acceptance of the party's lies. During 1984's resolution, Winston gets promoted to the Ministry of Truth, but he does not value truth. He finally learns to love Big Brother. The most powerful, effective, and terrifying message of 1984 is that totalitarian control of a whole nation is entirely achievable. If the world were to fall under the authority of one or more dictators, the future might easily become a twisted, horrible world where every movement, word, and breath is scrutinized by an almighty, omnipresent force that no one can stop or even resist without fear of death. Winston discusses the Marxist ideal of social class separation with upper-level inner-party members and mid-level party members, just as Marx referred to as the bourgeoisie and the lower-level proletariat. In the world of 1984, the lower class is known as the proletariat, or proles for short. According to Marx, when one group is oppressed by another, a revolution will occur, and that revolution will be led by the working class. Winston expresses this idea clearly in his diary. On page 69 he states, "If there is a hope, it lies in the proles." Winston further contemplates that hope for the future is found in the proles. On page 69, he states, "Because only there, in those swarming, disregarded masses, 85% of the population of Ashenia, could the force to destroy the party ever be generated?" Therefore, Winston concludes, if changes occur, it's up to the proles. He further stated on page 69 that rebellion meant a look in the eye, an inflection of the voice, at the most, an occasional whispered word, but the proles, if only they could somehow become conscious of their own strength. This is a direct reference to Marx's notion that the proletariat will become more restive and distrustful of their rulers, eventually revolting against them. From a Marxist perspective, the world of 1984 has clearly spun out of control. This strikes a chord with the readers because it signifies not just being governed by a higher authority, but also losing a part of oneself and becoming simply another member of an all too powerful system. There are multiple literary devices used in the novel 1984, but for this presentation I will be discussing the flashback and paradox literary devices. A flashback is a scene that takes place before a story begins. In the story, Orwell depicts their memories of Winston with the use of flashbacks. On page 203 it states, "In the dream, he had remembered his last glimpse of his mother, and within a few moments of waking the cluster of small events surrounding it had all come back. It was a memory that he must have deliberately pushed out of his consciousness over many years." Throughout the story of 1984, the main character, Winston, experienced flashbacks from his past that brought him to self-realization. As the story progressed and the flashbacks continued, Winston's memory began to be restored as he remembered previous events from the past. The reconstructing of Winston's memory contributes to the overall theme of memory that the story offers, allowing readers to feel a more personal connection to him. More specifically, the flashbacks depict the animosity society puts people through. Winston was taken away from his family as a child, and he believed that he was the one who killed his mother, when in actuality, his dream shows that his mother was killed by society. Appearing only in his dreams and memories, Winston's mother represents better, pre-party days when life was safe and not quite so oppressive. Moving on, a paradox is a logically self-contradictory statement or a statement that runs contrary to one's expectations. On page 34 it states, "War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength." This is a paradox because of how contradicting each statement is. Each statement given by the society is in literal opposition of each other, but is given to the people as if they are made to be true. This quote is used throughout Ashenia and is absurd, but it is also accurate. According to a statement from the book on page 70, it says, "Until they become conscious, they will never rebel, and until they have rebelled, they cannot become conscious." This phrase implies that folks are trapped inside the party's motto and have been brainwashed into obeying regulations that they have in place. Moreover, the saying, "War is peace," explains how being at war keeps Oceania under control. The reason for war is to maintain their economic function without increasing the wealth of their citizens. This demonstrates how the party feels that conflict stops their country from rebelling. Furthermore, the slogan, "Freedom is slavery," appears as a paradox throughout the narrative. Society deprives its individuals not just of their freedom, but also their humanity. This statement implies that the party's members do not understand freedom in Oceania, since slavery and control are all they know. Overall, this paradox paints a picture of the totalitarian society depicted in the novel and is very effective. For this section, I will discuss the similarities and differences between the novels The War and 1984. A similarity which was present in both novels was symbolism. In The Wars, horses are a traditional symbol of freedom. Robert Ross's exposure to their incarceration and brutality as a military animal reflects his progressive loss of freedom throughout the novel and shows a depreciation of both human and animal lives during World War I. In one case, Robert was commanded to kill a horse that had broken his leg and was in pain. He killed a suffering horse, representing his loss of freedom. Similarly, in 1984, there was a paperweight which Winston bought from the shop underneath his room. This paperweight was really important to Winston. The paperweight fascinated him so much that he bought it as an attempt to reconnect with the past. The past is something which cannot be thought of in the world in 1984, hence the paperweight represented freedom, similarly to how horses represented freedom for Robert. Eventually, the glass paperweight on the ground is smashed when the thought police arrive to take Winston and Julia away. It's almost as though Winston's prospects of reclaiming the past are also broken, indicating his freedom is gone, just how Robert's freedom was gone. A difference between The Wars in 1984 is the ideals of the protagonists and how they stick by them through each story, respectively. In The Wars, Robert Ross is a man who is depicted as an animal lover, a person who values the life of animals more than humans, one could say. Throughout the story, Robert tries not to harm any animals and even tries to save some. Right at the end, Robert was trying to save the horses. Robert realized that the horses were in the abandoned train. He freed 130 horses and fled the area. Not long after, Major Mickle found Robert and told him to surrender. Robert instead fired upon him. This indicated that Robert stayed true to his values and love for animals, even through a life-or-death situation. He risked his life and disobeyed his superior to save the animals who he values. On the other hand, Winston hated the party throughout the entire book. He opposed their system and thought it was absolute garbage. But as seen towards the end, in the face of fear and pain, Robert went against his ideal. He sold out Julie and eventually took the job from the party. He even got promoted, and right at the end, he was seen writing 2 + 2 = 5, something which is incorrect, but it indicates the control the party now has over Winston. It symbolizes defeat. Winston at the end states that he finally learned to love Big Brother, denouncing his hate and rather expressing his love for the party's ideals. The poem The Caged Bird Sing and 1984 share a similar problem. Politics, human rights, and public opinion are the issues that both the book and the poem express. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings is Maya Angelou's heart-wrenching poem that reflects on the mindless oppression that the blacks were subjected to back in the olden days. Her portrayal of injustice using the free bird and a caged bird leaves us with a bitter taste that reminds us of the long-abolished slavery. Whereas 1984 depicts Winston's struggle to find freedom and destroy the ideals of the party. In relation to the poem, the freedom Winston desires can be considered the free bird, and the caged bird can be depicted as Winston. The poem states, "A caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown, while longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom." Winston is a man who is caged by the ideals of the party and tries to sing by speaking out and trying to form an underground group called Brotherhood to abolish the party. He is scared of getting caught and leaps into the things unknown, implying that he does not know what's to come. His tune or voice is heard by Julia, who also dislikes the party. They both sing of freedom by breaking the rules of the party in Mr. Charrington's room to ultimately overrun the party. Moreover, in stanza 5 it states, "But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams, his shadow shouts on a nightmare's scream, his wings are clipped and his feet are tied." This clearly indicates the aftermath of Winston's rebellion against the party. Winston's wings are figuratively clipped and his feet are tied, and he shouts on a nightmare's scream. This can be indicated by the torture Winston faces as a result of his singing or revolt against the party. As the poem says, Winston stands on the grave of dreams, which represents his principles being destroyed, and he is now standing on an extinct ideal, where he ultimately comes to love what he despised the most, Big Brother and the party.